What's up, guys? Figured since I'm here at my computer working on the map, might as well do another video in case you guys have nothing better to do. I have the Google Maps open so I can see what I'm doing. Trying to emulate the real terrain. So this actually has some terrain washed out. This is just GE Giants Editor. It comes with the game for PC. I don't know. I don't think it's available for consoles, so. I am on the Minnesota side. I finished the fields on the Wisconsin side, so now I'm just kind of carrying over and putting some more final touches on the field layouts. When I first started this back last August, all I really did was get the field and the terrain and kind of roughed in some areas where trees are. Now that it's converted over, I can do a little bit more fine tuning with the fields, smooth the terrain. Make this a little smaller. So I already managed to do this area. This field's kind of broken up. And then once I finish this section, I'll probably start placing trees. I have all the trees, oak trees, down along the river. Now I'm slowly working my way to the Minnesota side. I'd like to get this section right here, these fields, finished, and then I can go and pepper the trees in. And so, but this is kind of a interesting little area. I don't even know what this is. It's like kind of marsh. It's not technically supposed to be trees here. It's more of a marshy. So I'm gonna take trees out here and actually add in some dirt instead. Not that it really matters. Kind of have a dry swamp area here. If you want mods, Google is your friend. You can find whatever you want. It's a search engine. It's Google mods for farm sim, and it'll give you a long list. Alright, so this is kind of a funky. Probably try to parallel the road when I cut this. Cut it like that. So it looks like there's like a house or something in this section, and then kind of confusing. Oops. Turn this to grass. And technically, there shouldn't be anything between these fields. This should actually be brought out a little bit more. This should turn into grass. Alright, so that should be a more accurate representation. So I'm not exactly sure what kind of crops are in these fields, to be honest. Definitely looks like there should be something like here. This map is based on Osceola, Wisconsin. Well, technically it's, yeah, Osceola is the town over here, but this is St. Croix River. But it is based on the area on the borders of the St. Croix. Um, where I'm working right now is actually right on the Minnesota side, the St. Croix Trail Road or something like that. Forget the exact name. Okay, so we're getting a little bit closer, and then there's obviously a little dirt road that comes back here. Back to this house. Kind of a dirt road. House is right around here. And then I actually think this this will come out. This will be a little bit. It's like a. This is a road, I think. Maybe not. So if you've never tried to make a map before, um, definitely takes a lot of time, a lot of patience. It's definitely not an instant gratification type of project, but if you have a project in mind like this is based off an area where I grew up, so when when it's completed, it will be more enjoyable to play this. I know like a lot of the European um, and Italian, they make a lot of maps based off of real world areas, and it makes it a lot easier because you can just kind of look at a picture or a map and try to mimic that as best you can, especially if you have good topography um, of the area, so you can make accurate elevations of the area as well. So this is the first map I've actually made, um, really from complete scratch. That's based off of a real area. Also has the digital elevation. So the elevation is of the area, and use satellite images of Google Maps to put in my fields and the roads, and then you just come back and do touch-up work. It's time-consuming, but it's going to turn out to be a really nice map. So I spent probably 3 months or so getting all the elevations and the roads in and the fields, so it's been a significant amount of work. And probably this last month when I got it converted, I pretty much only painted the crops in and put some trees in, so that goes pretty quick, but there's a lot of work you have to do to make sure your elevations are smooth and your terrain is accurate before you start painting in textures. Um, Definitely not looking forward to doing the actual fields boundaries when you have to purchase the fields. That's going to be really, really annoying to do that. I think I have to come back and fill this. I think I got this wrong. Oh shoot. Definitely didn't get that wrong. It was... No, this is good too. Someone watching my videos says they don't like my videos. It's kind of hilarious. I'll never understand why people say some things. Anyways, this definitely isn't going to be the most interesting video ever, but there's some people that might enjoy it, learn something from it. I know last time I did this I learned about interactive placing of trees, which was a huge time saver. I don't spend that much time in GE, so I don't know all the tricks when it comes to map making. I really want September to hurry up and get here so we can start watching hockey again. It's kind of thought that. What else is there to do? So this, I'm gonna put some soybean stubble in these fields. I really haven't been in the mood to play the game. The game really is just kind of too boring for me at this point. Maybe I'll get back into it, but I just have no energy to play the game. So typically what I do is I try to, if I'm not in the mood to play or I don't really have time, start working on some other projects I've been meaning to get to, but this game, the motivation comes in cycles, I think. Sometimes you feel like playing, other times you feel like so the nice thing is, the way I understand it is you have to paint in all of your terrain, your crops, for fields that aren't going to be mission fields. And since you can't do missions in multiplayer, it doesn't really make sense to even bother. Because when they're missions, the game kind of controls the crops based on the field, but if it's not part of a mission in the index, it's you have to paint your fields in, otherwise the game won't control it. Plus, it's always best to, if you were to convert over to a different version, or who knows if the next version of the game is going to be different, it's always best to keep your GRLEs complete. Plus, it allows for a better PDA map when you get to the point of taking your PDA. Otherwise, your entire PDA map would be brown. So, the only downside with building a map off of an actual real location is sometimes a real location isn't ideal for everything that you can do in the game. Like, this area, there's no lumber yard. So, if you're going to cut down a tree, there's no, you kind of have to retrofit the area to accept certain elements of the game. Like, no one in this area grows potatoes or sugar beets, but you can obviously do that in game. So in this area, Osceola, and even in Minnesota, there's literally nothing, no locations remotely close. Where even for grain, there's no real big mill or elevator that accepts grain. Um, so that's the only downside is kind of have to retrofit fake locations into the map, which isn't hard, but you like to try to be as authentic as possible when you're building a map. Um, you're trying to replicate an actual area. But doing it this way is a lot faster, like I said. You don't have to invent, for the most part, where anything goes. You just copy existing area and it goes much faster because, like, when I was working on my Wind Chaser map, that was all just kind of retrofitting a new idea, really overhauling an existing 4X map. But it takes forever because you keep rebuilding areas over and over and over because you don't like the layout or the flow. And it just takes forever. And at the end of the day, you're still not satisfied. So, um, for me, it's just better to try to replicate a real area that you know. And I think there's a decent value of um, enjoyment playing on an area that you know where you grew up. There's some idiot in the comments. Troll. So by the time I finish this map, the new game, what is it, FS 19 will probably be out. And the odds of me like converting this over are pretty much like non-existent. So odds are I'll be stuck with this game for a while. I haven't even had time to properly convert all of my 15 mods over. It's ridiculous. The amount of time it takes to do it, and then you lose a lot of your scripts that made that mod more enjoyable to use. I don't know. The thing I hated most about 13 and 15 was the lighting. The lighting would lag your game, and the lights wouldn't even compound. They'd like cancel each other out. You'd have black blocks on your terrain, and that's been fixed in this game, so I don't really see the need to switch when the new one comes out. gonna be too much work. All my released mods are on Mod Hoster. Pretty sure there's a link to the on the video description. Has everything in there. It's the only place where I upload mods. Yeah, I mean, European maps, the areas are quite cluttered. It's Europe in general is tiny compared to the vastness of North American, Canadian, U.S. Um, Especially out. I mean, I live in Massachusetts right now, and it's super cramped because it's all built off of literally cow paths. Where out in the Midwest, where I grew up, it's all planned out. There's plenty of space. Never really had to worry about anything. But the amount of detail that Italian and European map makers put into their work is incredible. You just don't see that. Um, but then again, American maps and Canadian maps are completely different because it's a lot more basic, really. It's just really just um, trees and ground, and there's not much in between. There's power lines where those European maps, and they're just totally packed and run down buildings, and which makes them pretty fun to play, really. But obviously, if you want to run a big American dairy or a big crop farm, that's not an ideal map. And I was skeptical at first placing all these 3D trees, but I opened the game and I was playing it in game, and it really has no. I'm still at 60 frames per second, so I was surprised that the trees don't affect the frame rate, and which they really shouldn't. They only have a render distance on the actual uh, geometry of 600, and then the rest of it is a kind of like a picture, the LOD that's rendered out. So I shouldn't have been surprised that it wasn't going to affect. I think the only area that will kind of get a little bit, right around the 45 frames per second will probably be when I start building the town area with all the houses and buildings, and especially when lights come on at night. I think that might be an area that gets hit with the FPS. But so far, it's not even noticeable. My PC specs are in the video description of every single video. I don't know, I might do in-game test. Just drive around the area a bit. But every time I do some GE work, I had to delete everything that was cached, so it has to recache everything from when I last saved in order to update for it to reflect the changes you make in GE. This is the first time I built the roads in Blender 2, so it's all smooth, and previous map I did, it was all placed in GE, and wasn't ideal. Didn't really look the greatest, or was pretty difficult to drive. But when you do things in Blender, you're able to make it nice and smooth, and definitely very easy to drive. There's actually like a nursery here. Zoom out's a little easier to see. It's gonna be nice when I finish all of these fields and with the trees and the terrain part of this map, then I can start focusing on the farms and the small details that really make the map come to life and really make it enjoyable to just kind of not even like farm, but just drive around and just have more realistic scenic views all the time. There is a very large quarry in this area. It's I believe it's just a gravel, sand and gravel. Um, I know there's a map out there that has like mining equipment and scripts, so um, that might be a function. Have an operating quarry, move sand and whatever. It always blows my mind how these people make all these custom scripts and totally change the game. And like they don't even get paid for it; they just do it as like a bizarre hobby. So I'm actually curious um, to get into the game and use Courseplay to calculate the area of these fields because they seem pretty big, but I imagine most of them are probably like 60 to 100 acres. I know there's one on the Wisconsin side that's probably 250 acres by the John Deere dealer. Tri-County Implement. It's a massive field. Which is strange because there's in this area there's really there isn't a large grain farmer or anyone that has a large grain operation. It's all pretty small to medium-sized farms. Most being dairy. There's no large industrial scale crop production going on. No one drive around in, 500-600 horsepower tractors. You just never see that. So that's one thing I might change. I might make a location that has a larger farm. Because I know my interests change all the time. Like sometimes I want to go big, big time operation. And other days I want to do small dairy. So it'd be nice to have options to kind of. And I think there's a few locations that are kind of could easily handle a larger. For example, this area, it's not huge, but I mean, it has a fairly decent sized grain complex and shed. So that farm is right here. And then this is just like a junkyard. Junkyard farm. This one's like probably an old farm that's not even operational. Here's a quarry I was talking about. Large green. This is a decent size. Probably a dairy farm. So, like, you can see that there's a lot of. Um, this one would be a decent dairy. My map really cuts off like right here, so like these wouldn't even be good to even put in. This one was probably one of the larger, I would say, grain farms for the bin. They got trucks out there. Other than that, you know, these are pretty much the farms you see are these smaller. There's just nothing. And then you go on to St. Croix Trail Road. There is one decent size. This guy has a few small bins. This is probably the largest dairy in the area that would be on the map. It's kind of interesting to have all their pastures right next to the water, but definitely have some blue-green algae in there. Then up the road there is this kind of a smaller, they got the bins, kind of a smaller rundown. And there's another dairy here with some bins. So there's nothing really huge. Um, Another gravel operation. This is an old non-functional farm. A lot of non-functioning farms. This is an old rundown. There used to be a lot of farms in this area, but I think they all pretty much sold their land and quit because they couldn't make it. Like this guy, all run down, but you can see the barren fields. They just put their fields into, I forget what it's called. Where if they don't farm it, they get money from the government for, I forget what it's called. But essentially, if you put some of your land into non-production, um, you not only don't pay tax on it, but I think you get like credits. I don't know how it is throughout the state, but I know like around my area, like instead of like farming as much acreage and putting as much crop out there on the market as possible, you know, because obviously the more grain you put out there, the lower the prices. It's a way to kind of control supply demand. And then I think it's part of like a wildlife um, program. They do like pheasants and quail, and but you can see like this a huge part of this. This is all cropland at one point, but I think they put it all into um, this reserve. You just see it all over. Like right here, this all used to be crop, uh, productive crop. Nope, not anymore. This is a large field, no longer producing. This is probably the biggest area, and then you go over to the Minnesota side, and you don't really see as you see a lot of these fields, and they're all pretty much still actively tilled and in production. So it must be a Wisconsin program, or at least our county, Polk County, because you just don't see that here on the Minnesota side. So, which is interesting. I'm not sure the politics behind that, but I definitely like the Minnesota side a little bit more. It has more character to it than the Wisconsin side. Wisconsin's pretty, um, you know, bigger fields, a little bit less trees, a little bit more flat. This is where the actual town is right here. So you can see all these trees that I've placed so far. It's like 40,000 or something like that. It's ridiculous. But it goes fast, so. Alright, so I think I might start placing the trees here. This is, what road is this? Row Ave. So basically I'm just going to take a oak tree here, copy it, going to paste it into my oak. Alright, so I kind of place the trees by road, that way it doesn't get too crazy. So now we're back over here. Control B, get into interactive placement. So with this, you can really place a lot of trees, and you really don't have to worry about anything, because the interactive placement uh, puts it right at the level of the terrain. So when you have crazy terrain like I do here, you don't really have to be very careful, which is great. Allows you to place trees quickly. So I have the paintable trees and bushes on here too. Um, Originally, I was just going to keep it at that, but I do like the idea of these 3D trees, and I was skeptical at first, but because I thought I was going to just kill my frame rate, but apparently it doesn't. So even better. So you can see how many trees we've already placed. And goes quick, and it makes the entire area look a lot better in game. The paintable trees, they kind of give it a more thick look without adjusting, without really having to pepper the trees in too thick. But I definitely plan on coming through and placing like birch trees and some other variety of trees, so it's not just oak. But the nice thing about keeping it as these default trees is with the season mod, these trees will actually change color with the seasons, which will look really cool. That was the main reason why I really wanted to put these 3D trees in, is because of the seasons mod has that ability to change the foliage texture. And if you just had paintable trees, they wouldn't change. So that's the main reason behind it. Because if you're in this area ever, the most people uh, really like this area in the fall for the foliage, the shrubbery. They like drive around in their cars and look at the leaves dying. I don't know, I'm so used to it. Here in Massachusetts, they like drive up to Vermont and stuff, or like people from New York come up to look at the foliage. Which, being from northwest Wisconsin, we have that every year. In our front and backyards and all over. And it sucks, because then your family makes you go out and rake leaves or chop leaves. Which I never really understood why we do that. Why do we rake the leaves? I know like they'll get more acidic and stuff when they decompose, but like if you just leave them in your yard, like why does it matter? Why do we do that? Like what happens if we don't rake the leaves? It's just gonna get snowed on. Who cares what it looks like? So you can see how many trees we placed in a matter of minutes. This interactive placement is key. I actually learned this from the last live stream. Shows you how much time I spent in GE. I know there's a couple other shortcuts and there's a couple other scripts where you can place things along splines, but really not to the point of using any of that yet. So I might try to finish up placing these trees and maybe give you guys a tour. You know, start the game up, drive around this area that we just did. So are there any trees? Okay, so there is a couple trees like right here. Cluster of trees right here. I don't know why people ask if this map is going to be released when I'm still not even close to being done with it. Doesn't make sense to me. The real question is, will this map ever be finished? I would say that would be a more appropriate question. But the answer would still be the same. I have no idea. Now we're getting closer to... some trees over here. So I think it's kind of weird that this farm is split up, like in between the road. But what can you do? These painted trees are a little thick. So then we're gonna finish up trees over here. So you can see how boring map making is. Or maybe you think this is really cool. I don't know. I think modeling and working in GE is, they both have their pros and cons. I definitely think in GE you can get, it feels like you can get more done, you know, as compared to when you're working in a modeling program. You're so obsessed with the smallest details that, and it's so easy to navigate in Giants Editor that. Alright, so we might fill in this section, finish this up while we're here. There's actually like a road and a house back in here, which like that'd be a sweet place to have a house, to be honest. Just the middle of nowhere. No one can see you. You're so secluded. And then you got the view of the river. Be awesome. It's my dream to have like 400 acres and build my house right at the end of it, so no one can see me. I don't have to hear traffic. No one can be nosy. It's like one thing that really bothers me is it seems like everyone is so nosy these days. They're always like concerned like what you're doing, what you're up to. I'd rather have a house that no one can see, no one knows what's going on. Privacy. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people that play this game that are from the same area that I am, or relatively close. So I mean, on my Facebook page, I've seen a lot of people that are from Osceola, which is kind of cool. I mean, I don't think there's very many computer games out there that you can just kind of like post a picture and someone's like, oh yeah, I can relate to that 100%. Like, I know exactly where that is. I know exactly like whose farm that is. My house is right there. Like, you're putting my house in your map. That's pretty cool. Like, and if I ever get to the point where this is to a point where it's acceptable to release, you know, if I ever get to the point where I finish it, I think there's going to be a lot of people that really would enjoy that just because, it's a map based off of their area that they know very well. And again, that's one of the cool things about making a map off of a area versus some kind of made up fictitious land. There's a large airport on this map too, and I noticed there's been some planes and helicopters and stuff released for the game. So someone's asking if like Bing's is better than Google. I use them both. It's just that sometimes they have different satellite images. Like Bing uses different images than Google, so like you can get a little bit better idea of an area that Google Maps might not have a really good picture of this, or it might be in different seasons, so it gives you a more crystal clear idea of what you're making. So 'cause they don't use the same satellite images, so it pays to, if you're gonna use um, try to make a map off of an area, it pays to use as many different sources as you can. Because I mean, I'm from this area, I grew up here, but still, like, I don't have a lot of these areas I've never driven by. The area's huge. It's like what, 8 kilometers by 8 kilometers. 64 square kilometers. It's you know, no one's gonna have that memorized unless you just drive around the area all day, every day. But and then Google Earth is another. Google Earth is great. I used Google Earth when I was doing the DEM because sometimes the topography map I was using was to um, too confusing for me to even understand what I was looking at, because it didn't, like, there's some areas where it's like I don't know if this is supposed to be an elevation or if it's like going uphill, downhill, just the way the topography map was designed. I couldn't really tell, so that's when Google Earth is great because you can actually like zoom down and it's like, oh, okay, so this is going up or this is going down. So it takes away a lot of the confusion, especially if you're in an area that you're not familiar with. So Google Earth is good with that. So I actually, no, that's a different map. So this is the topography map I used. You can see these red lines. I use these. These are exactly 8 kilometers versus 8 kilometers. And so you know that this area is, but you can see what I mean. Sometimes, like when you scroll in, it gets real hairy and you don't know. So that's why Google Earth is key. Um, and then this is pretty much the map I also overlaid, using the same dimensions and same coordinates, so they would superimpose over one another. And then you just kind of paint in roughly where all the fields are and where all your trees are, and then you come back and you fine tune it. So it's quite a process, but once you get all that in, it goes pretty quick. But just those two images, to do those two images was probably like 4 or 5 months worth of work. So it definitely It takes a long time just to get to this point. You know, this is a 16x map. Obviously, it's huge, you know, compared to everything else. But um, even if you're doing a 1x map, it's gonna still take you a decent amount of time just to do those two steps. And then you can, you know, basically put the detail into area. Like I'll probably start playing when I do play, like over there, and I'll do all the detail over there, and then you know maybe I'll come over here next, and then do all the detail in this area, and that's really how you get the map when you're putting in all the fine detail. That's how you really do it. Is you kind of like play the area and then build it up as you go. If you try to do it all in one shot, you get burnt out. You know, this is a process where you get burnt out fairly quickly. Alright, so probably bring the trees down to this area, and then I'll call it a day with this section. Alright, so we'll try to put as much trees as we can. Do I take requests for mods? No, I do not. That's the nice thing about when you learn how to do it. You put in the time to learn, you don't have to request. You can just make what you want. When you've equipped yourself with the skills and the knowledge, you don't have to rely on anyone else. So it's a great feature to have. Okay, so we're getting closer to getting this back end up to snuff. Obviously, we're gonna have to come back here through a second pass and add more detail and more bushes, and it doesn't look like we have much for floating trees. Except this guy. Found this guy. The guy's trying to hide. So then next